So you got your email moved into Office 365, congrats, but you haven't figured out how to get your file server files moved over in Office 365 as well. Very common thing, we talk to people about it all the time at Zerillion. You know that making this happen for your company will probably involve SharePoint and OneDrive, and you have Google searched the topic a bit, but you haven't found a how-to article or a YouTube video that gives you the confidence to make this migration for your company. So you're stuck with your file server, or maybe you're double paying for a cloud file sharing system like Dropbox, which you got enabled, you got it running, but you set it up with no planning or security controls, and that is going to be a big problem for you later down the road when you try to rein that security in. And the irony is, with your Office 365 subscription, you already own a very powerful and sophisticated file sharing system, but you're not using it because you don't know what you don't know. And I'm going to be a little bit tough on the IT managers here, because while I appreciate that you have the interest to move your files in Office 365, you haven't taken the time to properly train on these new modern Microsoft 365 systems. And by properly training, I mean taking like an 8-hour online course and spending 32 hours completing the labs for that course. That's real training, and it's all freely available to you from Microsoft. Another thing you could do is complete a certification. And I'm a big believer in certifications because there's something about putting your money down for an exam, and it's not a lot of money, and scheduling a test date. And it pushes you to deeply understand a technology in a way you could never achieve by even taking an online course or Google searching bits and pieces here and there across the internet. So I'm going to challenge the IT managers in this new modern enterprise cloud world we operate in. IT managers, they need to be brave. They need to get out of their comfort zones. They need to lead the charge, and they need to train. So with that being said, many of you still have a file server you can't figure out how to get rid of because you don't understand how SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams work together. And your file server has been around a long time, and its folder structure and security configuration is a big mess. And if you're like most of the companies we talk with that have file servers still, there are tons of files in that file server that are dated and irrelevant, and they're just useless noise in your system that bog down your file searches, and yet you have continued to carry those old files over from file server upgrade to file server upgrade. And you also likely pay to back up those old files offsite with offsite backup systems, which, if you're like most of our clients that still have image-based backup systems that back up to the cloud, those systems can run anywhere from $300 to $1,300 a month. And you have no visibility or control on who is doing what with your files once you give them access to a file folder. So once you give them access to a folder, they can do anything they want, intentional or unintentional. They can make copies of sensitive or highly valuable files. They can make copies of entire folders if they like. They can copy those files to a USB drive, or they can just log into their Google Drive and upload them there right from their desktop. You never know it happened. And they aren't going to tell you, especially if they're on their way out and leaving the company. And look, people also make innocent mistakes, right? They can attach a sensitive file to an email, and they can accidentally send it to the wrong person, or they could store a sensitive file on their personal computer, which has no encryption or security protection whatsoever. The reality of file servers in 2019 is that they are configured basically the same way we did it in 1996 with Windows NT 4. We created a shared folder, we applied a security group, and then we added or removed users to the security group. And then remote access to the file server is provided through a VPN on the firewall. And then once users have access to the file server folder, they can do anything they want, and there's nothing to track where those files are going. And that's only half the problem, because user security in 2019 is pretty much the same as 1996. We have a domain controller server that holds a list of usernames that are easy to guess, with passwords that never change. And if we do things like require password changes or complex passwords, and we don't allow users to reuse their old passwords, it forces the users to work around our security by writing down passwords on a piece of paper and storing it in their desk, or storing those passwords in a fake Outlook contact, or storing those passwords and usernames on their personal smartphone. So it's really just best to assume that some of your users have given out their usernames and passwords through phishing email attacks, or hackers have already have some of your passwords by hacking into third-party websites that your company uses every day to do work, where that third-party website, the username is your company email address, which is easy to figure out, and the password on that third-party website is the same password you use in your company every single day. And then from there, the hacker will just see which logins will work so they can access those files and see if they then can use that to blackmail and extort your company. And all of this can be prevented by getting your files into Office 365 and making Azure Active Directory your primary identity service and turning on multi-factor authentication. So when a hacker steals one of your users' accounts and now they're logging in from Russia on a computer that Azure Active Directory has never seen before, it can say, hold on here, let me pause this for a second. I've never seen this user log in from Russia on this computer, so let me go ahead and ring this user's cell phone back in the United States to make sure it's really them. And then from that point, the sign-in attempt will fail and your files will stay safe. And some of you watching this have big shot clients, like Fortune 500 type clients. And those clients will audit your IT security. They want to know how you will protect their data they give you to work on and how you're going to keep that data safe. And I don't imagine most of you are filling out their audit forms by stating how things really are. That your company effectively uses 1996 file sharing technology and 1996 security protections. But that is the reality of 99% of the companies that I talk with that have file servers. The server operating system might be updated due to a hardware refresh. So it's now Windows Server 2012 or Windows Server 2016, or maybe even some of you have Windows Server 2019 file servers. But the IT manager's security skills and the configurations they put in place are still effectively Windows NT 4. And I want you to take a moment to think about how valuable those files are. Those files are the company's digital assets, and the company spent a lot of money to create those digital assets. I'm talking about assets like sales proposal templates that save time, highly confidential financial analysis spreadsheets that track things like client or product profitability, proprietary processes or formulas that your company spent decades to put together, sales lists, client lists, marketing content, PowerPoint presentations that you paid a third-party company to put together for your company. Your company spent a lot of money to develop these digital assets. And let's get real and be specific about the money the company spent on those digital assets. So if you took a professionally skilled employee that does content creation or analysis work on a computer all day long, and you took the total cost of their salary, their benefits, their employment taxes, and you divided it by the hours they perform work for the company each year when they're not on paid time off, holidays, vacations, stuff like that. So say around 1,900 hours. So we took the total cost of that employee, everything that it takes, and divided by 1,900 hours. We can roughly get an average cost of around $75 to $125 per hour that employee works. So let's just use a really easy number of $100 an hour, right in the middle of that $75 to $125 an hour. So if that employee were to spend 4 hours on an Excel spreadsheet doing an analysis, as an example, that spreadsheet, that digital asset, is immediately worth $400 to the company. And if that employee were then to spend 30 hours over 4 weeks, that file, that digital asset, is now worth $3,000. And what if multiple employees are collaborating on a document, batting it back and forth over weeks, making comments and changes? That file can easily be worth tens of thousands of dollars to recreate from scratch. And that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is it's very possible timely and important business decisions and actions need to be made based on those digital assets. And so those digital assets are expensive and they are a big investment that the company made. The company should be very concerned with protecting the investment it has in those digital assets. And employees should not be able to just take those assets with them to competitors or start their own business. They should have to pay to create those, just like your company did. And IT managers, I'm speaking to you. You are the protector of those digital assets. And that Windows file server and Windows domain controller aren't getting it done. Anyway, so if you are on board with what I just described, then we just have to figure out how to make a smooth and peaceful transition from your crappy file server setup to a modern and sophisticated secure file sharing system in Office 365 for your users. Now, I know that end users and the IT pros that love them are most comfortable using a map drive look and feel inside Windows File Explorer, and that's totally cool. You want to be able to simply click a folder, see a file, click on the file, and be able to drag and drop those files between folders. And the good news is, we're going to give you that experience. And then for your end users that are willing to spend a grand total of 30 minutes to update their skills from using Windows File Explorer to a more modern experience of using Microsoft Teams, and they want to learn a far more effective and efficient way to collaborate with their coworkers and their team, we'll show them how to access those same files through Microsoft Teams. The point is this, the really important point is that both the old schoolers and the new schoolers can work with files how they are most comfortable, be it Windows File Explorer or Microsoft Teams, while working in the same shared file folders. And at Cerulean, this is how we set up our clients all the time. And this is where finding the right Microsoft Cloud partner becomes so important. If you find the right Microsoft Cloud partner, they can get you integrated and launched thoughtfully and securely while avoiding the landmines that won't be good for your company or your career. And they can also show you how to monitor and manage your cloud file sharing system going forward. And if you don't want to manage it, see if they have cloud managed services to manage it for you, like we do at Cerulean. Now, one thing that is challenging with Microsoft how-to articles and videos is that they tend to go very deep on specific technologies, but they don't provide a how-to on how all of these things are meant to work together in the real world for small businesses. Because Microsoft training tends to have their very large enterprise customers in mind, customers with tens to hundreds of thousands of users. So for my people, the IT managers and the quasi-IT managers of businesses with 20 to 100 users out there, I'm going to clear all this up for you right now. When we put a solution together at Cerulean and present a proposal, the goal is to get that client 100% in Microsoft Cloud services using Microsoft 365 and have no servers of any kind, virtual or physical. And this means email, files, phones, and security and management is in Microsoft 365 Cloud services. And by cloud services, I'm talking about services like Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, where we don't manage server hardware and we don't manage server software. We configure and manage access controls, security controls, alerts, and notifications that come off the system, but no hardware and server software. That's a cloud service as opposed to having a virtual server up in Microsoft Azure where we don't manage the hardware, but we still manage the server operating system and on up. So we want the client to be 100% in Microsoft 365 Cloud services, and ideally, their business apps are also web apps or browser-based apps, and they're not Windows client-based, though sometimes we have legacy Windows applications that do need to be moved up into virtual servers in Microsoft Azure, and that's a whole other topic. I won't get into this video here, but it can be done if we need to do that. Now, keep in mind, I didn't say Microsoft 365 doesn't require maintenance. It absolutely does, and I have a whole other video on this topic. It is a 1.5 hour video called Maintaining Microsoft 365. I'm not going to get into it here, but it absolutely does require maintenance. It has tons of notifications. It's a very sophisticated system. It is a different skill set than working with server hardware and server operating systems. It's actually a much more sophisticated skill set. But the good news is the days of monkeying around, maintaining or refreshing server hardware and software are over. Microsoft handles that. But we are responsible for configuring and securing the cloud services and managing how people are working inside the system and protecting our company's digital assets. Microsoft does not do any of that for us. And so now, with a focus on getting your files in Office 365, I am going to tie it all together for you so you have a solid, practical understanding of how SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive work together, and how we use cloud security and management services like Microsoft Intune, Azure Active Directory Premium, and Azure Information Protection, and Microsoft Cloud App Security to keep your files, your digital assets, safe and under your control. And I'm going to be demoing all of this inside of Cerulean's very own Microsoft 365 tenant so you can see how a proper configuration looks and works and feels that was set up thoughtfully by trained and certified engineers with lots of experience migrating clients' file servers over to Office 365. And I'm going to show you what your file sharing system could be like if you get it set up by someone who knows what they're doing. So once you have your file server files moved into Office 365, we can shut down that file server and you're never going to deal with file server maintenance or hardware refreshes ever again. And usually, once the file server is gone, we are done with servers in general. There might be a domain controller left over, and that's a separate minor topic. But we can shut down the backup and disaster recovery system that you might be paying a monthly fee for. And if you are using Dropbox or Box and paying for a third-party file sharing service, we can go ahead and shut that down and stop paying for that as well. So here is what our shared folders look like inside of Microsoft 365. And it's pretty intuitive. So here's our file server. And inside there, I've got these shared folders: accounting, finance, HR, legal, marketing, and sales. There's many others, but these are the ones that I have mapped to. And I have that I can go in right into the folder. I can take a file, I can drag and drop it, I can go ahead and launch it. This is a fake file, by the way. Here, I can go ahead and close that out. And what I've done is I've given the users that map drive look and feel that they're used to. So we have two key areas here. We've got our shared folders right here, and then we have OneDrive, which is our personal business storage. So this is like what you would consider like the user drive or the home drive that we used to call on a file servers, but it's basically my personal business documents that I'm really not collaborating with others on. But if I wanted to, if I'm working with a document and I want to now collaborate with somebody on the marketing team, I'm just going to take this, drag it over into marketing, and voila. It's just like having that file server experience, but inside of Microsoft 365. But now that we have all of our files inside of Microsoft 365, we have all these awesome features available to us. So for example, if I go back to this file and I open it up and I go make some changes, and right away you can see this is automatically saving. So I've got AutoSave on, it's saving as I go, and then the user is protected as they're working, which is huge. But let's take it a step further. What if that user goes, oh my goodness, I need the way this file looked 2 weeks ago because it's all messed up now. No problem. That used to be something that the user would have to submit a request into IT or go back to the backup system and say, look, I've clobbered this file, it's a mess, I need the way it looked previously. I could just go File, Info, Version History, and I can go ahead and grab the file from the way that it looked previously. I can go ahead and open this and it's going to say this is a previous version. Do I want to make this the current version? I can hit restore, or I can just go ahead and hit File, Save As, and I can go ahead and save it as a new file if I don't want to mess up the current file. That is really powerful for the end user, and it allows IT to free up their support resources so they can focus on other things, and the user isn't slowed down. This is really nice protection that you get right away inside Microsoft 365. So right away we get these versioning controls that allows users on their own to go back and recover their own previous versions. But then we also have all these amazing features around protection for the users in the company for files that are deleted. So right here, if I'm back in the marketing folder and I'm looking at a file, I'm like, oh man, did I delete the file? What happened here? No problem. I just go to my recycle bin that's right on my computer. And I want to show you here, I deleted a couple files here, but here's this one right here. It's called Inbound Leads. And if you look at the location of this thing, it's in the marketing folder right there. So I deleted the file, but the system is smart enough to say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and maintain this link in the recycle bin inside of Microsoft 365 that you can go and recover yourself. And if I want to, I can just go ahead and right click and I can just go ahead and restore that file. There was no call to IT. The user wasn't slowed down. They were able to just go right here and look in the recycle bin, their own recycle bin on their computer, but that file is still a shared file on the marketing folder inside of Microsoft 365. This right away isn't something that's available to you on a traditional file server. But let's take it a step further. What if somebody else deletes the file and you're looking inside your marketing folder? So I'm back here and I'm going, whoa, where'd this file go? And you're looking in the recycle bin and you're not seeing it. And you're like, man, what happened here? Okay, great. We still have tons more protection to discuss. I'm going to go right click on the marketing folder and I can just go to view online. And once I get in here, I go into the recycle bin inside of Microsoft 365. I'm like, oh, wait, there's the file. So great. From right here, I could just go ahead and choose to restore. And so now if somebody else deletes stuff and you're trying to locate it, the user with very minimal training is able just to go in and just go to the recycle bin inside the Office 365 portal, find the file, and then restore it if they want. But I want to point out more protection for you. You're looking in here and like, wait a minute, it's not in the recycle bin. Oh no. What if somebody accidentally deleted it then out of the recycle bin, or somebody intentionally deleted it out of the recycle bin? Well, check this out down here. Look at this. It says, can't find what you're looking for? Check the second stage recycle bin. So this first one that I just showed you, this is the first stage recycle bin inside of Office 365. But if somebody deletes it from there, there's a second stage recycle bin that only administrators have access to. So if I go in and click on this, oh, there's a file there. Oh, great, there's the file. It is amazing to me that I just showed you without any fancy configuration. The system just comes set up this way, that there on the desktop was a recycle bin that I could just go to as a user and recover something that I deleted. But then if somebody else that I'm working with may have deleted a file, I could go right into the Office 365 portal and go into the recycle bin there and recover the file. But if somebody even accidentally or intentionally deletes the file from the recycle bin, there's that second stage admin only access recycle bin that we can still recover the files from. That is amazing protection for the company. But I'm still not done. There's more. Now, what if we have an insider threat? So somebody deletes a file from the first stage recycle bin, and we have somebody with elevated admin privileges, and they know about the second stage recycle bin, and they delete it from there. Well, then what? Well, good news, because if you properly set up retention policies inside of Microsoft 365, we're completely covered, because we have, I'm going to call it the third stage recycle bin, but it's known as the preservation hold library. And I'm going to show that to you right now. But this is where when we set up a retention policy inside of Office 365 and we say, no matter what happens to a file, whether it's deleted or not deleted, we are holding all of our files for a minimum of 7 years, 10 years, 3 years, 20 years, forever, whatever. But even if those files are completely deleted out of the recycle bins, the preservation hold library is going to hold files that have retention policies tagged to them. And I'll show you that right now. So here I am in the second stage recycle bin, and all I have to do is, I'm still in the marketing folder, but now I'm over into site contents, and there it is. There's the preservation hold library. And here I'm going to find files that are tagged with retention policies on them, and I can recover them. And so this is incredible. So we have the user's local recycle bin. We have over in the Microsoft 365 cloud service side, we have the first stage and second stage recycle bins. And then when we apply retention policies, we also have a preservation hold library that keeps files no matter what their deletion status is. That is unbelievable. And here's where I set those. So here's the settings that I have for that marketing folder. I'm inside the Microsoft 365 compliance portal, and I have a 7-year document retention policy. And the settings are so simple. Do you want to retain content? Yes. For how long? 7 years. Do you want to delete it after this time? Yes. Done. Done. My God, right? It's so simple. And I say yes because after 7 years, marketing data or marketing files, they're just noise in the system. I don't need that. Now, we do have some folders like HR, legal, stuff like that. They have forever retention policies on them, but everything else is a 7-year retention policy. So we have good data governance. It's not just about protecting that data, but it's also about removing data that's old and useless to the company. But I got one more thing to go over with you. Can we throw our users a bone by not just protecting the files that are up inside of Microsoft 365, but can we also protect important folders on their individual computers? Oh, you bet we can. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go into OneDrive. I'm going to click on Settings. I'm going to go to Backup and check this out. Important PC folders. I'm going to click on that and Manage Folder Backup. These folders are syncing in OneDrive. New and existing files will be added to OneDrive, backed up and available on your other devices even if you lose this PC. So even if this PC becomes lost or stolen and the user is thinking, oh my goodness, I had these files on my desktop. Oh no, no problem. With OneDrive, we have your desktop folder backed up, your documents folder, and your pictures folder. Isn't that awesome protection? I mean, think about how well everything is protected now. We went over how the user had the ability on their own to go right in and restore previous versions of the files that they're working on. They had the ability to go in their own recycle bin and recover and restore files that they deleted. They had the ability to go into the Microsoft 365 portal and restore in the first stage recycle bin other files that others have deleted. And there was even a second stage recycle bin. And then I even showed you the preservation hold library where we can set retention policies to recover files that were deleted from both recycle bins. And we also have this awesome protection for our users if they have files on individual folders on their computers. So even if the laptop is lost or stolen, we will be able to set them up with a new one and then just install OneDrive and then restore those files for them. And that is an incredible protection right out of the gate when you're working with Microsoft 365. You couldn't even dream of having this kind of protection with a traditional file server and a backup disaster recovery system. Now, the other thing on a traditional file server that we have to take care of, in addition to be able to recover files, is that we have to set up access controls to those folders. So here I am in a traditional SharePoint document library, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here I'm back in the marketing folder, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this right here, and I'm going to go down to library settings, and I'm going to go into permissions for this document library. And now we have something that looks fairly similar. It's not really very friendly looking, but we have something that's similar to how you would work with permissions on a traditional file server shared folder. Here we can break inheritance, we can grant permissions, we can set up a marketing group, we can add users, remove users to the marketing group. And what I tell people is that if you need really granular controls for your shared folders, then you're probably going to have to go towards the SharePoint document libraries. Because now I want to show you what it looks like if you're inside of Microsoft Teams. So here we are in the marketing folder in Teams, and if I want to manage permissions there, I just click on the marketing team and I go to manage team, and I mean, look how simple this is. I have the owners and then I have the members and guests, and I can just add members or I can choose to delete members. That's it. I think this is so intuitive, so much more user-friendly to work with. And so this fits 99.9% of our clients when we need to set up access controls or who has access to what folder. We just set up the backend in Microsoft Teams, even if they're not planning to use Teams, and even if they still want to work with those files inside of Windows File Explorer, no problem. But this is so much simpler and so much more intuitive to work with than traditional SharePoint document libraries. Now let's turn our attention to OneDrive, because OneDrive is super important, super critical to make all of this file user friendliness and collaboration work nicely. So OneDrive is two things. First of all, it is personal business storage space, my personal business files that I'm the only person working on. You could collaborate with others with those files, but that's really not the point. They're your files you're working with. And if I want to collaborate with people, then I will move those files then into the appropriate folder, like the marketing folder, for example. OneDrive also, very importantly, is an app on your computer, which sits right here. And I have OneDrive running in two configurations, my personal files and also my business files. But now that I have OneDrive on here, what is really important is that when I have OneDrive running, OneDrive doesn't just synchronize everything. So it's important to understand, why does OneDrive sync? Why can't Microsoft just configure a true map drive connection? I mean, the internet connections these days are really fast. So why can't we just go ahead and map a drive to a shared folder up in Microsoft 365? And it has to do with the fact that when those files, when you don't have a good connection, are going to break and you can corrupt those files. You won't have that problem on a LAN connection. You will have that problem on a WAN connection. And that is why Microsoft uses a syncing technology to replicate that map drive look and feel, but it's still a sync. And we have important information over here on status when we're in OneDrive. It's important for you to understand, because OneDrive uses something called Files on Demand. Files on Demand basically uses machine learning to determine what files should be on your computer, literally synced on your computer, and what files should look like they're on their computer. They're searchable, but it's actually not taking up space on your hard drive. So I have plenty of those here. So right out of the gate, I have this file and it's showing the status. It hasn't synced yet. Okay. Then also has these light green checks, which means OneDrive has determined that I've been working with these files quite a bit, so it's going to keep them locally on the computer for me, so they're quickly available for me. Now let's scroll down until we can find a cloud file, and here's an example one right here. This file, the system has determined that I have not used this file in quite some time, so it shows me the file name, but the file is actually not stored locally on my computer, and it's done that to free up space. So if I want, I could choose to keep it there. I could right click on this file and choose to always keep this on this device. And so then OneDrive will say, you know what, he wants that there no matter what, even if he's not using it, fine, we'll go ahead and keep that synced all the time. Now it's also worth pointing out that I can choose to free up space on any of these things anytime I want. I could select all these files and say, go ahead and free up space. So then it'll make all of these cloud files. So the names of the files will still look like they're there, and I'll still be able to search on them, but only if I then click on that file will it go ahead and download it and then keep it synced as long as it thinks that I want to have access to those files. So I'm completely in control to be able to always have OneDrive keep a synced copy of a file on my computer, or clear up a bunch of space on my computer for files I don't need anymore by just choosing to keep those as cloud files. So it looks like it's on my computer, but the file is actually stored up on the cloud. And only when I click on that file will OneDrive then go ahead and hydrate the file, so it actually is sitting there on my computer. But I can also choose to just let OneDrive do its thing and say, OneDrive, just use your machine learning to go ahead and learn what files I need and I don't. And so I'm not wasting space on my computer with files that I haven't touched in 2 years. I want to keep them, but I don't need them synced on my computer. And that is what Files on Demand is inside of OneDrive. It's a very important feature, and it's a very intelligent feature for working with our files. And OneDrive also does that same thing inside my shared folders. So if I go over here and I go to marketing, you'll see I have that same thing going on. And so I created a mapped drive look and feel, but basically I told OneDrive, go ahead and synchronize the marketing folder, but I also told it, use your machine learning to determine which files I need to keep synced on my computer and which files I don't. And again, if I want, I could choose to go ahead and keep everything on that marketing folder synced all the time. I wouldn't recommend that, but you could do that. Or you could turn them all into cloud files. I mean, there might be a folder where you want to be able to search on it. You don't use it regularly, but you want them to all be cloud files. You don't want them to take space on your computer, but you want to be able to search on them. And only then, if you find one you need, you double click on it, and then OneDrive goes ahead and syncs, and you can work with it locally and stuff like that. So now I'm going to shift over to the OneDrive mobile app, and I use this all the time. So here is a mirror image of my phone, which is right next to me right here, and it's up on my computer screen, and I'm going to go ahead right into OneDrive. And I use a Samsung Galaxy Note 8. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OneDrive, and there's my OneDrive files. And I think it's really handy that I can click on this and I can shift back between my personal OneDrive files and my business OneDrive files. But when I'm over here, I can certainly click on a document, and I've been in that situation where I'm pulling up to a meeting. I'm like, oh man, shoot, I got to look at that file or that document, that proposal, whatever it is, as I'm going to this meeting. It's so reassuring to have it there. And it's that the service works so reliably to synchronize between my OneDrive mobile app on my smartphone and the OneDrive desktop app on my laptop. So the other thing that I use this quite a bit for is when people give me paper. So people hand me a paper and I'm like, there's a code, there's a phone number, there's an ID or something I got to reference that I know if 1 or 2 days goes by, I'm going to lose that paper and it's going to drive me nuts. When I get paper handed to me, I go ahead and use this little camera feature right here. I'm going to click on it and I go ahead and scan that in, and it puts this neat little blue line around the document, and I'm going to hit the white button and pulls that right in for me, and it'll turn that into a PDF. So I click done, I save as, and voila, now that file is going to be with me forever as opposed to being lost. And I use that all the time, both in my personal OneDrive and also my business OneDrive. And there it is right there. Look, there's that PDF. And the other thing that's worth noting as well is that my shared files are available to me as well. That marketing folder that we started off with, well, it's right here. I click on it, go into Documents, General. There they all are available to me. I can still collaborate with people on them. So it is so handy to be able to work on my OneDrive files in the mobile app, personal and business, and then be able to go into our shared folders in the OneDrive mobile app and work on those files, still collaborating with our team. And then also to be able to scan in pieces of paper I get here and there and have them with me digitally. The OneDrive mobile app is awesome and it's super reliable and it works really, really well. It's nice, fast, and snappy. So I got the headset on now, I've got Teams up, I got Will on the screen, and what I want to show you now is once you have your files moved into Microsoft 365, you now have the power of co-editing or co-authoring. But basically it's the idea that you and another person can be inside of an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation at the same time making changes. So I'm back in the marketing folder. Here is the file, the demo file I've been working with, hot new leads for 2019. So I've already got that pulled up right here in Excel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some changes. Will's going to make some changes, but you can see right up here, here's me and here's Will. And you can see there's this blue outline around him. And I can see right here, he's already moving around. So there, he just highlighted this. He's making some changes here. I can see he's moving around from cell to cell, and he can see me too. So if I go in there and make some changes, so I'm gonna go and put we need to check on this. So you just put this stuff in here. They need a follow up in the next 2 or 3 days. So he's entering this stuff, and I'm seeing his changes. He's seeing mine. What time is it? And so this is really great that as you're working together in a document, for example, a lot of people need the ability to be able to go into an Excel spreadsheet with other people and make changes at the same time and not get locked out of that spreadsheet. And once you have your files in Microsoft 365, it gives you that capability to do that, to edit that, and in the full version of Excel, not just the web-based version. And another thing that comes up is to say, well, oh boy, what if we made changes to a file, we went too far, and we need to roll back? No problem. Even as we are both making changes at the same time in the spreadsheet, Microsoft 365 is keeping track of those version changes as we go. So right here, if I go to File and I go to Info and I go to Version History, even as we've been working on this real time together, Will makes changes, I make changes, the version history is keeping track of that. So if we need to roll back to a previous version, we can do that. So it's really powerful to be able to work with people inside of Microsoft 365 like this. Will and I have done PowerPoint presentations, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets in the same area, in different areas, and it's really helpful. You can move things along really, really fast, especially if you're doing it inside of Microsoft Teams, where you can get into a video conference or you can get into a desktop sharing where we're even sharing PowerPoint presentations when we're presenting something to clients. Very powerful feature inside of Microsoft 365. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, there are going to be times where you don't want people to be able to make changes to documents. So while it's great, you can do all this co-editing and co-authoring, sometimes you want to lock it down. And how do you do that in this kind of environment? Well, it's real simple. You just check out the document. So I go over here, I go to File, I go to Info, I go down to Manage Workbook, and I check out. And here we go. It's confirmed it. Checked out. This file has been checked out to you. Check in this file to allow other users to see your changes and edit this file. So right now it's checked out to me. They can't make any changes to it. They can see a read-only version of this document, but I can make all the changes I want and not worry about other people making changes, collaborating the things that I'm doing. But when I'm done, I can just check it back in. So I click check in and I put in my reason why I'm done with this file and I hit OK. And then it's going to go ahead and check it in. It'll throw it into read-only mode. But if I want to go ahead and continue to edit it while allowing other people to edit it, I can just click on Edit Workbook. So, or I can just close it out. So this is a really powerful collaborative feature. So it's nice that everybody can get in there and make changes at the same time when you want to allow that. But now you have a true document management system where you can also check out those documents when you want to make changes and not have others be able to get into it until you check it back in. Now, one of the things that's really handy when you have your files inside Microsoft 365 is to use modern attachments. And so what that means is, let's take you back to the old school way of sending files outside your company, because here, when I work in Outlook in 2019, I'm really just working with people outside the company. I do all my work inside the company, inside Microsoft Teams. So here I'm going to show you the old school way we all send attachments out. I pull up an email, type in the client's name, I type in the subject, and I've got an attachment here. All I did was go to attach the file. I grabbed the file that I want and it attached it right here. I send it off. What I don't like about this is when I send the file out, I don't have control over the file. And now I've got to keep track of different versions. And especially when you're dealing with proposal, then you're going to have several different versions of that proposal going back and forth over months. And I don't like that confidential information where it pertains to Zerillion and pertains to the client or this prospective client is just out there in the world. I want more control over that. And Microsoft 365 gives me that. So let me show you that right now. So I'm going to go into Windows File Explorer. And right here, I'm going to go take that same file. So here I'm in OneDrive. All right, so I'm going to take this file. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Share. And I'm going to send a link. Okay, so the thing I want to show you right now is this says anyone with the link can view it. Beautiful, that's what I want. I want to be able to send a link out. I'm not going to put permissions for specific people on this link for a proposal, for example, because I want the client contact or the prospective client contact to be able to send this attachment out to whoever needs to be able to see it. But there's a couple of key things here. I'm going to have control over this link, and I'm not sending them the actual file. I'm sending them a link to look at the file, if you understand what I'm saying here. So right now, anyone with a link can view it. Great. Now, look at this. I do not allow editing. I am the only person that can edit this document. They're going to click on the link, and they're going to see a web version of the proposal. They cannot edit it. And also, it's worth noting that when we get on the next phone call that we get on, if we have to make changes to the proposal, I make a change. They click on that same link, and they're just going to immediately see the changes to that proposal. Also, really important, I love knowing there's an expiration on this link. So I just allow a 30-day link access. And if they don't do anything with this attachment, that link in 30 days will just expire. And they would have to reach back out to me in order to get a new refreshed link, which also will have an expiration on it. So I love knowing that our data, when it leaves our organization, especially like in a proposal like this, there is a time limit on that link. It won't just stay out there forever. Also, I block downloads. They can't download that. So again, they can only view it over a web portal, and they have to have this link. And if I want to take it a step further, I could go ahead and set a password to that link, and then I could call them and give them that password, or I could send them in a separate email that password to add a little more security onto that link. But this is a beautiful thing. I'm completely in control of the data in this file as it goes out. And once I go ahead and do this, I can go ahead and hit apply. And then what it does then, I can just click Outlook. And then voila, there it is. That's a nice friendly link inside this email. So I go ahead and put client@company.com. Dwayne's sharing a file with you, or I can say, here is the discussed. And here it is. It's nice and friendly. So you can see that here's a OneDrive link. You can change that up to however you want. And if they hover over it, they'll see it's a much longer link to SharePoint. Then it's also worth noting, I'm still completely in control of that link. And if I want to yank access to that link, I can do that as well. So I go back into Windows File Explorer, go to that file, go back to Share, Manage Access, and I could go here and I could go ahead and delete access to that, and I could remove that access to that link. And so again, I'm completely in control. I use these all the time. We use these all the time at Xerillion. Again, internally at Xerillion, we move things back and forth inside of Microsoft Teams. Outside of Xerillion, then we will use modern attachments, which is what Microsoft calls this, and we use Outlook to get that data sent out to those customers. It's a very, very powerful feature for security inside your system. Now, when you have your files inside of Microsoft 365, one of the most powerful features that you can put in place with just a little bit of training, but it's pretty intuitive, is actually working with your files in Microsoft Teams as opposed to working with them in the more traditional sense of Windows File Explorer and Microsoft Outlook. And I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. So here I'm in the desktop app version of Microsoft Teams, and I'm in the marketing team, and I'm in the files tab. Okay, fantastic. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to demo this file right here. Now, what we're going to be talking about here is when you combine files with conversations in Microsoft Teams, how efficient that is as far as collaboration and keeping track of things and bringing new people in your group so they actually can see the history of the collaboration that's gone on. Because when you're sending files back and forth inside of Outlook, you're trying to keep track of versions, and these files and all the conversations are just being dropped into these individual mailboxes, which doesn't work well for organization and collaboration. Well, with Teams, it's a cinch. So here I have a file, and what I want to show you real quick to give you a little context, I want to go into a conversation. Now look at this. There's 14 replies from this original posting. So imagine this person sent out an email, and then there was a bunch of people attached to the email with a file attachment, this suspect list right here, and they're batting it back and forth. So all these emails going back and forth with some people wondering, should I even be on this email? And here in Teams, this makes much more efficient work of this collaboration. So because this person used Teams for this file, all these 14 replies are not inside my Outlook mailbox, which is fantastic. And I have so many examples of this where you have like 17 replies, 20 replies, 25 replies. Oh my gosh, it's a mess. And in my Outlook inbox, it is unorganized. Here, it's right in the right place in marketing. So right here, I'm going to show you now, if I go back to files and actually click on that document and I go over to conversation, here's all that collaboration. And if I want to, I can review it right here, and I can go ahead and tag somebody and say, hey, can you take a look at this or that? And then they're going to get an activity notification right over here, and they're going to click on that activity notification. It's going to take them right to my posting on that document. How beautiful is that? And that really cuts down on a lot of noise inside your system and moves things along so much more efficiently. And then let's take that and look at that inside the Teams mobile app as well. So here I have the Teams mobile app, and as you can see, here's an activity alert. I could click on this and I could go ahead and respond if I want to. Here's another alert on an individual private chat. But let's go back to that marketing team. Let's go into general. I'm going to go into files. I can see my files right there. But also, here is that posting that I was looking at in the Teams desktop app. If I want to, I can go ahead and expand these conversations, and I could go ahead and really quickly get up to speed on what was going on historically with this document. And if I want to, I could go right to the bottom and I could go ahead and reply on this individual document as well. That is so helpful if I'm at an airport, or I'm over at a client site, or I'm waiting before I'm meeting with somebody, and I can help the rest of the team move forward with the collaboration on this particular document. And again, new people coming into the conversation are going to be able to see all the history on that document. So much more efficient and effective than working, again, in Microsoft Outlook and Windows File Explorer. So we have all these very powerful collaboration features and all these awesome capabilities inside of Microsoft 365 once we get our files moved up into Office 365 and off that file server. Now let's talk about how we're actually going to secure them. So let's get into Azure Active Directory. That is effectively our firewall. Identity is the new firewall. I didn't make up that. I heard that at a Microsoft conference and I thought it was great. So we have to make sure that if the system sees people that look like fraudulent users trying to access your files through your cloud services, it can stop them. And the first thing we do is we do that by turning on multi-factor authentication. That is a no-brainer. And in 2019, should be something that you always have enabled for your users. And it's one of the first things we talk about every time we talk to a new prospective client. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Are you ready to get it implemented? And imagine that one of your users gives up their username and password to a hacker through a phishing scam, or one of the business websites that you work in gets hacked into. And so there's a hacker somewhere or a hacking organization that now has some of your user accounts. And let's say that Azure Active Directory, Microsoft 365, sees that one of your users who normally logs in from Nashville today is logging in from Russia on a computer it's never seen before. Well, if you don't have multi-factor authentication turned on, the system will not be configured to challenge that hacker logging in from Russia. But if you have multi-factor authentication turned on, it can say, well, I've never seen this device before. I'm going to ring that user's cell phone to make sure it's really them. And then the sign-in attempt fails and your files stay safe. 99% of the companies we talk with do not have multi-factor authentication enabled, or the few that do have it turned on for their administrators. But then the rest of the users, who it's probably safe to assume, especially if you have a couple hundred users in your organization, 20% of them have given up their usernames and passwords, either their current ones or their old ones. So it's best just to assume that some of those user accounts are out there and people are trying to figure out, bad people are trying to figure out what they can do with those usernames and passwords they have to steal, blackmail, or extort your company and get some money from you. So what we got to do is turn on multi-factor authentication. So turn on those service settings in your Azure Active Directory tenant. And yes, you can set up, if you want, some trusted IPs. So you can say, well, look, this local area network, we trust this network, and any authentication attempts that are coming from this network, go ahead and allow them through. So our users aren't bogged down trying to log in and stuff like that. Totally fine. You can set those up. And you can also set it up so that it will remember those devices for 60 days. So those users aren't constantly having to go in and re-register their devices. And then you can also set up how you want the verification. Do you want to just ring the phone and then they can just the pound sign, or do you want to send them a code that it gets texted to their phone and then they have to re-enter in? It's a little bit more of a hurdle. Or do you want to use the Microsoft Authenticator app? But you go ahead and set up these multi-factor authentication service settings, and then you go ahead and you got to enforce it. So then you enforce it, and you got to make sure all your users can get in and they can get into all their services, but now the system is secure. So you got to turn on that enforcement. That is step one. In 2019, if you want to keep your system secure and stable, you got to turn on multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication is available for all versions of Office 365, Microsoft 365, from the cheapest version to the most expensive. Now, I would say that it's not enough just to say that you have logged in, you've passed multi-factor authentication. I very much care what kind of device you're connecting in from. And that's where we get into conditional access. This is also something in Azure Active Directory, but you need Azure Active Directory Premium, at least plan 1. And this is where we can set up things saying, I'm only going to allow you to connect in with a Windows 10 computer, an iOS or an Android device, and they have to be this version of the operating system, so an up-to-date version of the operating system. You have to have an encrypted local storage. You have to have a lockout screen, and on Windows computers, you got to have antivirus. Those are some of the basic settings. but we configure those inside Microsoft Intune as far as a device compliance policy. And then Microsoft Intune works with Azure Active Directory, and then Azure Active Directory goes to Intune and says, does this person have a compliant device, yes or no? And then if they do have a compliant device and they pass multi-factor authentication, they're allowed to connect into the cloud services and access our data. But I don't think it's okay that if somebody has a valid user account and they pass multi-factor authentication, they should be able to connect in with a Windows Vista computer that hasn't been updated in 8 years. Or they should be allowed to connect in with an iOS device that hasn't been updated in 4 years. That's not secure. That's not good for stability. And so that's what a conditional access policy does. So here we go. I'm not going to go deep into it here, but we have one for Windows 10. We have one for iOS and Android devices. And also I want to point out we have a geographic block. I think it's also silly that you say, well, if I expect all of our users to normally be logging in from the United States, but we're allowing access open to the entire world, I don't think that makes sense either. And we don't do that at Zerillion. And so what countries do you need your users to be able to log in from? And that's it. Everything else is blocked. So we have a conditional access geographic block as well. And it's something I would highly recommend you do in your company. And again, you can do that with Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1. Now I'm going to take it a step further and let's get into something that's Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2, and that is Azure Identity Protection. This is where Azure Active Directory uses machine learning to determine what are normal patterns of sign-in behavior for your company. And then it can evaluate risk. And if it sees a sign-in is valid, it's getting in, but somehow it's connecting in from a place and devices and you normally don't connect in from, it's going to score that risk higher and higher and higher. And then we can say, if we have a medium risk or a high risk, I don't know how that user got in, something doesn't look right, I don't know how they passed multi-factor authentication, but we're going to go ahead and disconnect that user, we're going to block their access, we're going to disable the account, we're going to force a password reset. Those are certain things you can do when using machine learning identity threat protection, and you get that in Azure Identity Protection, which is something that comes with Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2, and it's what we use at Zerillion. And it's also what the clients that want the top security use as well. And it's something you get in Microsoft 365 E5. So there is sign-in risk behavior, and then there's also user risk. So Azure Active Directory can scan the internet, and it can see if you have users that have had their user accounts exposed on the internet, again, through a phishing attack, or maybe one of the business websites that you do business with got hacked into, then it could say, well, we see this user account in your company is exposed out on the public internet, and we're going to go ahead and disable that account and force a password reset. That is fantastic protection. That is Azure Active Directory proactively looking out for your company, and again, keeping your files safe and your company secure. And so these are things that you do not get with that firewall that's sitting on your local area network or that Windows Server domain controller. That is very basic, kind of dated protection for your system. If you get an Azure Active Directory and you get your files protected up in cloud services, you've got very strong security that you can brag about when you're getting a security audit from one of your bigger clients or anything else like that. It is very powerful security for your company. So get multi-factor authentication enabled and get it set up and enforced for all of your users. Get a conditional access policy set up so we require a certain level of security on the device you're connecting in from. And then I would highly recommend getting Azure Identity Protection, which comes with Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2, so you can use Microsoft's machine learning to see if there are threats that just don't look right compared to how you normally log in, or if the system sees some of your user accounts exposed on the internet. So now that we've got all of this advanced, very sophisticated security set up in cloud services to protect your files. So we had Azure Active Directory, we used Intune, we used compliance policies. How about protecting that data when it's actually been downloaded onto the individual computers or downloaded onto a person's personal iOS or Android device? What happens if that mobile device, that laptop, or even that desktop computer in the office, what if they're lost or stolen? Well, then what? We got a problem. And what I want to show you right now is how you're going to protect those files once they've actually been brought locally onto Windows computers, iOS and Android devices. The first thing you got to do is you got to make sure that those devices have encrypted hard drives, encrypted local storage. So that, again, think about that laptop. If it does get stolen, if it does get lost, it's not a big deal because the hard drive is completely encrypted. So even if somebody wants to go in there and try to find stuff, they can't do anything with it anyway. Or if a person has all their company emails synchronized to their smartphone and that gets stolen, and it won't matter because it's encrypted. Now, I'm going to show you that right now. And we're talking about, files that get brought on the C drive, files that get brought into the desktop folder, documents folder, and here's a big one, in the downloads folder. If they're on a web page and they're downloading sensitive data, or they're going to the Office 365 portal and they're downloading, it's just going to go right in that downloads folder. We have to make sure that that hard drive is encrypted. So we're going to go into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and we're going to go to Endpoint Management. And I have another video that's very detailed about managing computers with Microsoft Intune Azure Active Directory. What I want to show you right here is how we enforce and configure the encryption on computers that are connected into our company data. So here I'm, again, in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and I'm going to a configuration profile. The configuration profile is where I say if a computer is working on our network, I'm going to require these settings in the computer, and this is how I'm going to configure it. I'm going to develop a configuration profile, how I want my computers to be configured. There's tons and tons of settings in here, but what I want to show you is I've made one called Windows 10 Device Encryption. This is a configuration profile just to enforce and push out encryption policies. So I go ahead and set this, endpoint protection, and then right here, Windows settings, device encryption is required. Very, very important. And then if this is required, and then you have a compliance policy also in Microsoft 365 saying if you're connecting into our cloud services, you have to have a device you're connecting from, a Windows 10 device that has an encrypted hard drive. Well, this is where we set it for all of our computers, and then the conditional access policy is actually going to check that it actually has an encrypted hard drive. Very, very important. And I have a separate profile just for the encryption. And this is the way we set this up for clients. Now, once I have this encryption in place, if that computer gets lost or stolen, it's a bummer, but we don't have a security problem on our hands. We don't have to go, oh my gosh, was there data on there? It's encrypted. They can take the hard drive, they can reformat it, they can do what they want with the hardware itself, but they won't have access to our data, which is the most important part. And it's also worth noting you can go on and get very, very refined with the encryption settings. I just require it on the computers here, and then I have a compliance policy that's checking that that device has an encrypted hard drive. Now, you should also consider protecting your computers for the movement of that data. And what I'm talking about is this. I just described where we can protect the files on computers against the computer being lost or stolen and having a hard drive that is encrypted. Now you could take it a step further and say, I want to protect those files from being moved off company devices. And we do those with app protection policies. So again, I'm back in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and right here I'm under the app protection policies. And this one, I am doing this for Windows 10 computers. And again, this isn't a click-by-click scenario. I have another video about this whole topic. But if you want to be able to block files from being moved off of a company computer onto a USB drive, or from a company computer and then loaded up into somebody's G Drive portal, or attached to a personal email account and forwarded off to, again, a personal email. If you want to control that movement of company data off company devices, for Windows 10, this is where you would do that. You go to App Protection Policies, and you would set these settings right here. You go to Required Settings, and what you would do is you would set the Windows Information Protection mode. Again, I just want to give you an idea where you would go here. I have a much longer video on this whole subject, but this video is about file security and how you manage your files in Microsoft 365. And Microsoft gives you this capability. And then here you can say, if I have company data on a Windows 10 computer, I can either block movement of that data onto USB drives or other web portals, Or I can allow the override, but what we're going to do is, you can see this right here, blocks enterprise data from leaving protected apps, allow override. User is prompted when attempting to relocate data from protected to a non-protected app. If they choose to override this prompt, the action won't be logged. So if the user goes to take that file and move it onto a USB drive, they're going to get a little notification saying, it looks like this is enterprise data. You can go ahead and continue what you're doing, but just so you know, this is going to be logged. And again, people can innocently make mistakes moving data around. So whether it's innocent or intentional, it doesn't matter. That's probably going to be enough to stop that user. You could just do an outright block, and I've tried that kind of an enforcement policy before, but it starts to become very cumbersome for the users. And most users are not trying to do anything they shouldn't do. Sometimes they make innocent mistakes. So usually a little prompt message is enough to get it done. But this is where you would go ahead and set this. Now, this is Windows 10. What about iOS and Android? Well, we would set an app protection policy for iOS and Android. So again, I'm back in app protection policies, and I have one for iOS. And I want to show you right here, the data protection policies. Prevent backups. Those are blocked. You can't back up company data to your personal apps. And another thing right here is save copies of organization data onto that device. That's also blocked. And allow user to save copies of selected data to OneDrive for Business and SharePoint. So what we're saying here is, on an iOS device, an Android device, it doesn't matter if it's a company device, a personal device. We're actually, with an app protection policy, we're just managing the app. We're not managing the device. And then we're saying with that app here, what we've got configured is that those files can only be moved around inside company apps. And that's it. It can't be moved onto local storage. It can't be moved onto a personal Dropbox account. And that is how we make sure all of this data is managed appropriately. And you can increase or decrease the restrictions as you see fit in your company. But again, I would say just being able to pop up a message saying, it looks like you're moving company data off this device. If you want to proceed, that's fine. But just so you know, we're logging it. It's probably enough to get it done. Now, let's take this a step further. So we've talked about how we've protected access to the data, our files, when they're in Microsoft 365 cloud services through Azure Active Directory and conditional access policies and compliance policies. We've talked about how on individual endpoint computers, when files are brought local onto Windows computers, that we can create a little pop-up that says, hey, you're moving this data onto a USB drive, or you're moving this data onto your personal cloud portal, and you can set that notification. So basically, we're controlling what happens to files when they're on smartphones or Windows computers. But we can take this a step further and say, we can take a file, and let's say it's one that's sensitive, and we can put security inside the file that goes with that file no matter where it goes in the world. So sometimes we might have a situation where we've got to take a little file and a spreadsheet or a Word doc or a sensitive PowerPoint presentation, and we got to just send it off. We got to email it off, but it has sensitive information on it. And so the question is, how do we protect that? Well, we do that with security labels inside of Microsoft 365. So basically, it's the concept, if you took a security group, which you would build in a Windows Server domain controller, and you applied that to a shared folder to protect access to that folder, if you could take that security group and just apply it directly into a file, an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, something like that, if you could take that security group, apply it right in there, and it stays with that file no matter where it goes in the world, no matter where it's copied to, no matter where it's been emailed. But you would have to be somebody with an active Azure Active Directory user account, and somebody that has permissions to see that document, somebody that has permissions to be in that security group to see that document. And otherwise, you're not going to see that file. It's just going to be an encrypted piece of data. And that's what Microsoft 365 security labels are for. So I'm in here right now. I'm in compliance.microsoft.com. And if I go down here and I'm in information protection, and I have some security labels. Again, this isn't going to be a click-by-click how-to. I have another video on this whole separate topic, okay? And I know I keep saying that, but it's true. I have a much longer video about this specific thing. But what I want to show you here is how we're going to create these security groups, and then I'll be able to apply them directly to documents to protect that file no matter where it goes in the world. And it gives you a lot of confidence as a business. So here I've got one for finance, I've got one for HR, ownership, employees, sales. And what I can then do is I can apply these. So now let me go ahead and flip over to a document here. So now I've got this document, and let's say I've got information on here that's very, very sensitive, and I want to make sure I want this protected. Now, if you go over here to this icon right here, sensitivity, I drop this down, and you can see there's my labels for finance, HR, ownership, employees, sales. And it doesn't have to be like super, like let's say it's not something finance, HR related. Let's say you wanted to send this off to everybody in your team, but you only wanted employees of the company to be able to see this. Beautiful. Let's just go ahead and click on this. Boom, done. I go to the sensitivity, and you can see this, and it says right here, confidential, employees only. Only employees of Xerillian have access to this document. That's awesome. So even if you send this off, or let's say this was something HR related, or finance related, and you selected the finance group or the HR group, only members of the finance group would be able to see the document. Even if you emailed it to everybody in the company, it doesn't matter. Everybody else who is not a member of the finance group would just get a document that's encrypted and they can't do anything with. Same thing with HR, same thing with sales. And so this is really powerful protection for the company. And so now we've taken the situation where we've protected your files that are in cloud services in Microsoft 365. We've protected your files when they're on Windows computers or smartphones. And now we've protected your files such that if this file does need to go out away from company devices, away from our cloud services, Microsoft 365, it's still protected with Microsoft 365 security labels. Now, I want to move over to how we manage for insider threats. And those insider threats don't always have to be malicious. They can also be innocent. But how do we keep track of what's going on with our data to make sure that somebody's not doing things like doing huge downloads of company data, huge deletions of company data, huge amounts of sharing of company data? And that is in the realm of Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security, which is something you get in Microsoft 365 E5, or you get in the Microsoft 365 Identity and Threat Protection bundle that you can add on to a Microsoft 365 E3 subscription. But bottom line, what we're talking about is machine learning threat protection on your system. So Microsoft 365 learns what a normal amount of file activity is for your users, what you guys do day in and day out with your files. Again, just some easy examples. Normal amount of deleting, sharing, copying, downloading of files. And then when it sees a user doing something that's unusual compared to that normal baseline pattern, then it can raise an alert, and then it's up to us as administrators to determine what we want to do with that alert. Do we just want to send off a notification to administrators? Do we want to send a notification to administrators and the user, so the user sees that we are logging this and we see what's going on? Or do we want to set up automated processes at some point to say, well, we don't want people to be able to download or delete 100 gigs of company data. We're just going to go ahead and disconnect that user, and then we will ask them questions later. So again, this is a Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security thing. So I'm going to take you briefly through it right now. And what we want to do is go into protection.office.com, and then we'll go down to the alerts section. And I want to show you one right now, which is unusual volume of file deletion. So in this particular event, somebody was deleting a bunch of files and the system saw it, and it was an unusual amount, so it kicked off an alert. So they got an alert, I got an alert. That's how my system is configured. And I'll show you what that alert looks like when it comes through as an email. And here it is, alert, Office 365 alerts at Microsoft.com, and a medium severity alert has been triggered. Unusual volume of file deletion, 30 matches in 5 minutes. And I can click on this to go view details, and I can look at the logs and that sort of thing. So that's really helpful to know if we are seeing something that's unusual. And we can extend that and look even deeper into this. If I want to go into Manage Advanced Alerts, I click on that and I go in here. It says, do you want to go into Cloud App Security? I say yes. And here I am in Cloud App Security. So I want to just show you a couple right here. This is mass download by a single user. Be nice to know if that was happening. data exfiltration to an unsanctioned app. So two situations here. Let me start with mass download by a single user. It's very fascinating to know that Microsoft 365 is keeping track of where all these files are going on a computer, on a company computer or a company device, on a personal mobile device, but it just knows where all these files are at, inside the company, outside the company, and it's able to keep track of that for us. Again, this is visibility we never had with a file server, and it's just doing this in the background, and we don't have to manage that part of it. But now it sees, well, there's a mass download going on. What do you want to do? All right, well, look, it has this as a high alert. We'll go in and see what's going on. Again, in this system, the administrator got a notification and that user got a notification. And here's data exfiltration to an unsanctioned app. So wouldn't you like to know if somebody is taking company data and uploading it to a Google Drive somewhere, their personal Google Drive? Well, you have that visibility here on this system. And so we can make sure we have a good shot at keeping that data safe and protected. And again, it doesn't always have to be that the user had malicious intent. I would say probably the majority of cases like this, the user either was doing normal work that really, when you dug into it, you might actually reduce the sensitivity of the alert because the user's just doing their normal job, or they might have accidentally been copying data somewhere they didn't mean to. But we have the capability to manage this when we have Microsoft 365, Microsoft Cloud App Security, or Microsoft 365 Identity and Threat Protection Bundle that we can add on to an E3 package. And you can extend those policies. I mean, here's a big list of policies, but the big ones here: an unusual file sharing activity, unusual file download, unusual file deletion activity. These are things we can act upon and work with if we see them happening to our data. And one thing I want to show also is that when you bring your files into Microsoft 365, everything is scanned for malware. So if I go up here and I'm in the Office 365 security and compliance area and I'm under safe attachments, you can see right here there's a feature I can turn on. Turn on Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. So when I've turned that on and I'm checking files, so it's saying right here, if a file in any SharePoint, OneDrive, or Microsoft Teams library is identified as malicious, ATP or Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection will prevent users from opening or downloading the file. So that is really nice protection. So we talked a lot about, protecting against malicious or innocent insider threats when somebody is logged into your system, but also it's making sure that those files that are in your system are nice, clean, and protected from malware. So we've done a lot of talking about protecting our files when they're inside of Microsoft 365 or they're outside of Microsoft 365. But how about the data that's actually inside those files? Some companies have requirements that they not have certain data inside those files. And again, people can make innocent mistakes. And how do we make sure that the company is protected from putting the wrong kind of data inside those files and keeping it up in our system? So some examples of that: financial data, social security numbers, credit card information, tax IDs, personally identifiable information, or health information. These, for example, are templates. We put them on our system because our clients have them, so we implement it as well, just to watch how they work inside the files that we work with. We have plenty of clients that have really serious needs around this. And so with data loss prevention policies inside of Microsoft 365, we can turn on this protection very simply and make sure that the data that's going into those files doesn't create problems for the company. Now, one thing that improves dramatically when you have your files in Microsoft 365 is your ability to search on your files. So in a traditional setting, if I want to search for a file, and let's say I'm looking for a script that I used in a video from 6 months ago, I've got to go into Windows File Explorer. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for script. And, it's going to do what you would expect, but nothing super impressive. It's returning a bunch of results where the word script actually shows in the name of the title. Well, this is a lot better inside of Microsoft 365. So let's say I'm like, oh boy, this was a while back. I know it was a script, but I just don't remember the name I gave it. Well, Microsoft 365 can actually return search results where the word script actually appeared inside the document itself. So if I go here, now I'm in portal.office.com. Here is the search bar prominently displayed. And if I type in the word script, you can see I've got a bunch of results that have the word script in it. And Microsoft 365 is giving me everything in the tenant that I have access to. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is reduce this search down to files. And I'll get to this filter in just a second. But you're seeing here that it's returning results based on the fact that script is in the title. But let's go down a little bit here. And you can see the word script is not in the title of this file. But if I click this, you can see script is actually in the contents of the document, which is awesome. So that is so useful for finding those older files where you have a hazy recollection about what it's about, but you don't remember the name and you're trying to locate it. So it's really powerful for an individual user when we have our files inside Microsoft 365, but it is even more powerful for the company when they have their files in Microsoft 365. And specifically when it comes to doing deeper searches. So sometimes there's a call where it's required for the company, they've got to find some files. And a very classic and typical case is where the company is in a dispute with another company, or maybe there is a legal investigation. And it could be either the company is a plaintiff or a defendant, or the company is being called in by the plaintiff or defendant. But there's an e-discovery situation that's happening now, which is a big call for retention policies as a side note. You really should make sure that only the data that you need to keep to make sure that you're compliant with whatever regulating bodies that you need to be compliant with, that you meet those, and then most of that data gets, with a retention policy, eventually gets retained for that period of time so you're compliant, but then gets deleted later on. Anyway, that's a whole separate subject as far as legal risk and exposure. But that being said, sometimes you're going to need to be able to do these legal investigations. So a couple things here I want to show you. That's when we get into the realm of e-discovery, and it's a very powerful service inside Microsoft 365. So for sure, if you're an administrator of the system and you just need to do just a general search, so it's not a legal investigation, you could go right over here into Microsoft Search, into Content Search, and just go ahead and do the search. And I'll show you some of that in just a second. But if it is a legal investigation, there might be another aspect of this, which is you need to put a hold on any of the data that you need to find to make sure that it doesn't accidentally or intentionally get deleted, and it remains part of this case until the case is over and it's been resolved. So we're going to go into e-discovery, and if you can imagine a situation right here, I want to read the top of this to you and you'll get the point. So with the e-discovery service in Microsoft 365, where you have all of your files in Microsoft 365, says right here, after creating an e-discovery case and choosing who has access to it, use the case to search for email, documents, Skype for Business conversations, Teams data, and other content in your organization. You can then preserve the content and export the search results for further analysis. So that's a really fantastic thing. We could go ahead and put in a couple search terms, specify some dates, and we can, one, put a retention policy on this data so that it is held even if somebody goes and tries to delete it. We will hold that data. And then number two, instead of us going folder by folder, file server by file server, or trying to figure out where all of these files are located, maybe it's Dropbox here, OneDrive here, SharePoint here, Teams here, we can just go into the e-discovery service in Microsoft 365 and say, I'm looking for these files with these names, about these dates, and please give me all of your content. All of the files around that search result. So here we go. I made one called Smith Company. I'm in e-discovery. So again, protection.office.com, right down to e-discovery. And I went ahead and I created a case called Smith Company. And what I'm going to do is, if I click on that case, I just get this right here. But I have a couple areas that are really important. I've got holds, searches, and exports. Now, if all I wanted to do was just do the search and I didn't worry about legal holds, I would just go ahead and create this right here, and I would specify Smith Company and contract, and I'm specifying dates from 2010 to 2015 in all locations. How powerful is that? So there's files, which allows me to say all files across SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, but also in this case, the all locations also means all the emails. So the exchange online, every email going back and forth, it's going to give me all results. And I don't have to go mailbox by mailbox. I don't have to go SharePoint site or folder by folder, Teams by Teams group. It's just going to find everything for that based on these keywords here. And if it is a legal investigation, I want to make sure that these files stay here and somebody can't just accidentally or intentionally delete these files. I can go ahead and I can apply a legal hold on this and specify those same things. And it will hold on to all of those files that I specify inside of Microsoft 365 that are related to the Smith case. So these are really powerful features. And again, if you are the IT administrator and you get called on to do an investigative search for files, for emails, or even a legal investigation, this can be very time consuming for you. And the company is either paying for your time as the IT manager, or the company is paying for an outside service, or maybe like the law firm, a paralegal to come in and work and do this searching. But it's going to be very expensive, very time consuming. If you have your files moved into Microsoft 365, we already have a service ready to go, and it can just save us a ton of time to make sure that we have all the files we need, and we can put legal holds on those files if we need to retain them to protect the company in the investigation. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have retention policies on your files. And there's two retention policies. One is to retain stuff, maybe legal stuff that gets retained forever. But a lot of other stuff, you retain it for whatever compliance period that you require. Some places, like financial service companies, it's 7 years. Some places, it's 3 years. But you retain it for that period of time, and then you remove it from the system. Because generally, a lot of that stuff is just noise anyway in the system, so you might as well get rid of it. But also, the less data that's in there, the less time you're going to have to spend if you're ever involved in any kind of legal investigation like this. To get all of this modern collaboration capability, security, and compliance control, you are going to need Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, not Office 365 E3 or E5. And there's a big difference when it comes to security and compliance. When we talk to people the first time, most of them are using Office 365 E3 or the lower end subscriptions like Business Premium or Business Essentials, which they really were just trying to get email moved into Office 365 and get everybody the Office desktop apps. But Office 365 by itself just isn't good enough, and it's not a complete solution. And if that sounds like what you have right now, then you need to at least get upgraded to Microsoft 365 E3 and put on the add-on for it called the Microsoft 365 Security and Threat Protection Bundle. Or if you plan to use the Microsoft phone system and audio conferencing system, then just go straight to Microsoft 365 E5 if you can swing it. And then you need to find the right Microsoft Cloud partner. And you can reach us at 847-995-9800, or you can email us at support@Xerillion.com if you'd like to talk further about getting these modern capabilities and protections for your files in your company. Having your files inside of Microsoft 365 Cloud Services is a phenomenal way to work. Thanks for watching.